In this episode of the Soundworks Collection podcast, we chat with the sound team behind director Todd Phillips' Joker, Folie, Deux. For Phillips, sound isn't just an afterthought, it's a vital part of his storytelling. And in this film, the collaboration between Phillips and his sound team creates an auditory experience that blurs the line between reality and madness. In this conversation, we feature co-supervising sound editors and sound designers Erik Aadahl and Ethan van der Ryan, re-recording mixers Tom Ozanich and Dean Zupancic, production sound mixer Stephen Morrow, and executive music producer, supervising music editor, and executive producer Jason Reuter. I start our conversation asking Tom about his longtime collaboration with Phillips and his unique approach to his collaboration with the sound team.
This is my third movie with Todd. First one I did was War Dogs, and then, the first Joker, and now the second Joker. And even over that course of those three movies, I've personally seen a lot of, I think, him sort of growing and like embracing the sound process a lot more. I mean, he sort of entered the room back in the beginning with this actually saying out loud, I hate this part of the process. and it's like after War Dogs, he was like, oh, okay, that wasn't too bad, and then after Joker, he was like, actually that was pretty good, and then on Joker 2, he was totally, he was into it every time, but he was really like totally embracing it and loving it, and you could feel that. And I kind of saw that change over the course of it, where he just relaxed into it, where he was a little, resistant or something in the beginning of the first movie I did with him. So I think, yeah, he's really, I think, come to see how important it is. And in a way, I think his relationship with Bradley Cooper has helped that as well, because a couple of the movies they were involved in together, and then seeing each other and how they worked with us and everything, I think really advanced both of them in a way, to really embrace how important sound is and what you can do with it.
That's great. I mean, Stephen, what would you say in terms of this is a different film than the first time around with Joker? We're dealing with a musical. We're dealing with so many more elements. What did you find in terms of how you had to kind of prep him for what he was asking of you? Because you've been down this road before, but what was your sense of kind of the ask and then the reality?
Yeah, I mean, the ask from Todd was, hey, we're going to do a musical with Gaga, and she's going to sing live, and Joaquin's probably going to sing live, but right now we haven't decided that. He hasn't decided, and I just kind of thought, well, if she's going to sing live, he'll sing live, because that's kind of what she does. She's able to kind of convince her co-stars, oh, this is the way to do it. We just kind of went into it, with the understanding that, it's something new and different, and that we also had to be very aware on the production side not to slow it down, because that's the thing that, will drive a director crazy on a, if it's a first time musical kind of experience. You don't want to say, okay, now this is the sound moment. You kind of had to move forward on it, in the sense knowing that, he's just going to want to plow over these moments, not in a bad way, just like time wise, you're only going to have so much time to get everything ready. So, from our approach, we just made sure that he knew, like, we're going to have you covered no matter what you want to do. And then that's kind of how we went about, our day to day, just have everything ready all the time in case something popped up.
Jason, can you talk about your work with our director? What's your history been with him, and what was your sense of how the conversations first started, how they even evolved into, where things landed with recording everything live and basically with this outcome?
I started working with Todd about, 13 years ago. Started on hangover movies and, things with basic score and needle drop sort of situations. And, there were two projects. I think he was a producer on Star is Born, which obviously was directed by Bradley Cooper, but there was the notion of doing live vocals, which was, a bit of a risk on set at the time, but we had a lot of success sonically, I think, using that methodology. And then I think it was immediately after Star is Born, we started prep on the Joker, and it was, looking at the script and going, what would be the right composer? And I think sort of the old story was I had come up with a lot of these records from Hilder and sort of put them together as a playlist. Todd and I thought it was a great choice for the Joker 1 thing. So, and then fast forward, we come along to prepping Joker 2, and it's sort of, in a way, it was like merging the history of those two work environments together, so to speak. So we sort of knew we were going to try and bend a lot of the song standards into this Hilder world, which we call sort of Hilderization, where we kind of came up with that term. And then, I think the methodology for Joaquin and Gaga on set was all live vocals, not putting them in a box with a pre-record, sort of coming up with this live notion of them feeling things out with a live piano player, and then we could sort of arrange and make things in post-production. So I feel like the history was there with Todd. It was combining a couple different worlds of things we'd done in the past.
Can you talk about your collaboration with Stephen Morrow, your production sound mixer? Obviously, you guys just worked on Maestro together, and you've been down this rabbit hole before about live on-set recordings. What was unique and different about this film and this approach, and how big and how grand and playback and all those considerations and working with Stephen?
I think it was great. Steve, we go back to La La Land, so we've been doing this a while. Steve's obviously, we have a kind of the perfect shorthand for recording things live on set. He obviously kind of goes above and beyond his job to kind of, accommodate for music and the crazy things music wants to try. He's always sort of up for that challenge, and I think, knowing being familiar with Gaga, how she likes to sing live and everything. I think Steve was certainly had his head around it, in a major way. I think the interesting thing for him was like, okay, we're going to pull away all pre-records together and we're going to kind of feel these things out. And he was like, that sounds really hard in post, but great, let's go for it. So, they each had their own, piano player on set. Joaquin had his and Gaga had hers. And I think a lot of it just sort of came up with this natural flow of the movie that just sort of, the goal was to not make it feel like a musical. And I think that production technique really solved a lot of issues for us. For
Ethan and Erik, how do you find moments? I mean, there's great textures, there's great little hits, there's great moments of Folie, there's other things that need to be accentuated. When it comes to the musical cues, how do you guys find that balance?
Well, the whole conceit of this movie is, folie à deux means shared delusion, right? Between these two characters, Arthur Fleck and Lee Quinzel. So that's the sort of fantasy part of the film that's juxtaposed with the stark realism of Arkham Prison. And so sonically, we really wanted to embrace that dichotomy. And from that very first scene where Arkham Prison is waking up, hear just the gritty reality of that space and the inmates and the cell doors and things way down in the Z-axis, just to create the reality of F Ward. And that whole first, several minute sequence is kind of painting this new reality that Arthur finds himself in, being incarcerated in this mental institution.
Morning, sir.
Nothing good about it.
Get up! Let's go, get up. Let's go, boys. Let's get this show on the road. Come on, come on. Come on, get out of bed. Let's go, get up.
Clean this fucking mess up.
Hey, Jackie, I need a hand.
Put some clothes on.
What the fuck?
And then on the fantasy side, the sound design becomes like much more hyper expressive, much more tuned to the music. So this was one of the big collaborations between the sound design part of the crew and Jason Reuter's music team, was creating that sort of syncopation of tone and pitch and rhythm. let me step back just 1 second too and say the very first day we met Todd, he explained to us, he's like, okay, I want this movie to sound like it was created by insane people. So basically that was like the best creative license you can get to just see how far you can take it, see how out of the box you can be. I think Todd's whole approach was being out of the box with this movie. I mean, he's essentially flipping genres. He's flipping what the supervillain genre is on its head. He's flipping what a musical is on its head. And, you know, to us, that was incredibly inspiring to be able to not just do the generic thing that's done in every movie, but really find every little opportunity to do something sort of unique and special for him.
Ethan, what do you remember? Because the opening with the Joker with me and my shadow is like the Warner Brothers moment, which you don't expect, but when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, like buckle in. This is a different type of experience. What do you remember about seeing those animations and what kind of was most obvious about how to make that come to life?
You know, when we first met with Todd and we went through, you know, an early cut of the movie, sort of doing a spotting session with him, he mentioned, and there might be this like animated sequence, you know, coming that we're going to put on the head of it, of the movie. We're going to, you know, we probably will, but we're not sure. We need to see how it feels and how it comes out. And it took quite a period of time. We had been working on the movie for quite a few months before we saw like an early cut of that animation. And our first time seeing it was like, oh yeah, this is going to be amazing. To introduce the movie in this total other, yet another genre is like just so bold, and like talking about like wanting the movie to feel like it's made by crazy people. That was like sort of the perfect setup for that idea. So yeah, just really bold and also fun, like allowing us the opportunity sonically to just go in a completely different direction, you know, in this sort of wacky cartoon direction that's not done anywhere else in the movie.
And that was the one, you know, we mixed in Atmos, but that was the one sequence where we kept it vintage, you know, just on the screen, LCR.
Which was a bit of a debate. You know, we kind of, you know, Todd was like, do we want to start this way? I mean, it's the opening of the movie, you know, and making it so kind of narrow. And we kind of had, you know, played around with it and talked about it and said, no, I think it'll be great because of it being this sort of separate piece, and it establishes this sort of size, right? That's kind of very narrow, and you get used to it a bit. And then that even heightens the juxtaposition when the actual movie opens and we start going down that hallway, and it's just like super Atmos, you know, it's super surroundy. And I think, you know, it sort of forces the issue even more.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of that opening into this introduction of Arthur and Arkham and the reality of his current situation. Dean, what do you remember about just playing with the space and introducing Arkham? Because there's so much off-camera sound that you guys are introducing. It's just, you're like, what? Like, we've seen Arkham before, but like, it's just sonically, it's very alive.
Part of the reason Todd was more in tune to what we were doing and liked the process is correct me if I'm wrong, but my take on it was our dubbing process was long, and it was more like being in the cutting room. So he was used to just walking over, but we were in a process of mixing, i.e. cutting the movie. And it was just, it just evolved and it grew as the time went on. And I think that's also a comfort zone for him and why it worked. And then he embraced it because he wasn't going from the cutting room to a whole different vibe of the dub stage. We were pretty much an extension of how he worked. And I think that was a brilliant, because our post supervisor, Lisa Dennis, kind of plotted the schedule out in that fashion. We embraced it. I think it made the movie sound better the way we worked. Coming back to your question, there's so many moments in this movie I love, but I love the opening of this movie. And we made that decision just to make things bounce around, the lights on the top of the ceiling, the lights, things bouncing, because you don't really know where we are. And it had to sound frenetic. It had to sound kind of scary, ominous. This is what this is what they do every day. And you imagine if that's your very first night of staying in Arkham, how scary is that, waking up to all that? So we just kind of went with it. Todd and Jeff come to the stage to hear the first reel of what we were working on. They fell in love with it. It grew from a starting point to what you hear at the end. That grew as we worked on it, started saying, oh my God, we got to put more stuff in the back. And then when, what's his name, the big character, getting him out of his cell, that was a late ad. And then the whole thing is, that whole reel one is so brilliant with textures. And to Ethan and Erik's credit, they gave us the material to do that.
Well, and a lot of Steven's production. It was a total weaving of production elements, individually mic'd actors, group ADR. We actually sound designed. It wasn't just like cut by dialogue editors. We sound designed that. And one of the benefits of that whole opening too is it's all one long shot for quite a while. So the thing, whenever you have a cut in a film, if something's panned over here, now you have to pop it over here. Here we could do a full 360 dive following Arthur with his bedpan, through the corridors and hearing all of the commotions and the fights happening in different cells. And having it be one shot just made it so much more immersive and fluid with what we could do. With all of our material, and then how Tom and Dean were able to mix that stuff.
You got a joke for me today?
Feeling crazy today or what? Taken down to that floor. You got a big date today. You better put on a happy face.
And that was a lot of field recording that went into that too. One of my favorite recording trips on the movie was Ethan and I went up to Alcatraz Island up in San Francisco. And that was a treasure trove of sounds we'd never expect. But you close your eyes and you're like, this is a hard penitentiary feeling. And it's hard to describe with words. But from the very first scene, we peppered those sounds, cell doors, inmates throwing themselves against cell walls, foot scuffs on like the hard linoleum reverberating out in those spaces. It to me, that stuff took it to another level of reality.
Getting yelled at by the ranger.
Yeah, yeah, it was totally guerrilla. So, the National Park Service was not issuing filming permits for Alcatraz for that year for whatever reason. But they said, if you just want to go and do it guerrilla style and just not disturb anybody, go for it.
What does guerrilla style mean when you're working on a feature film?
Means no permits, no permission.
It means you show up and then with your rigs, and then you just collect everything you can and record, and there were tourists there too, but some of that gave us like really cool, crazy, indistinct, distant reverberations that we could put down the halls of E Ward. In the film, Arthur lives in E Ward, which is sort of the highest security part of the facility. F Ward is solitary confinement. Lee Quinzel is in B Ward, where they have nice things like music therapy. It's kind of the opposite end of the penitentiary from E Ward. So that was another part of it, like tiering our different locations. Basically, Arkham is another character in the movie. So, we're trying to just create that entire sort of sonic feeling, some of it subliminal, some of it very overt, to create that the underlying mood of all those scenes.
Steven, I want to go back to you. What's the reality of on set? I mean, the prisons are concrete surfaces, just hard surfaces, reflections everywhere. What's the reality of doing production audio in these settings?
The reality of production audio on a set, because basically everything interior was on stage over at Warner Brothers, and they built the sets 10 to 20 feet off the ground so that anytime you look out a window, you can kind of see across a courtyard. So those sets are very much a wood box set. And so the floors that look like concrete don't sound like concrete. So the goal was always to kind of minimize as much, fake sound or sound that you wouldn't want in the movie, like a wooden floor, and try to get, the actors as clean as you could. Also shooting, the film quite a bit shot with 3, 4, 5 cameras at a time, so there's always a close-up and there's always a wide shot happening at the same time, and so we really relied on radio miking as many people as we had. Anybody who could talk or speak, that was the goal. And so we always knew that there were certain things that you didn't want to hear, like the wood set, and then certain things you definitely wanted to hear. And so that's kind of what we focused on. And Todd was great. At the end of every day, he would go through in his mind what he thought, would be great sounding. Like, let's get all the prisoners together. Let's do some wild with them. And we did that every day, for every set, depending on what that scene was in the day, so that they would have, at least something to go off of, editorial wise. So it was a great collaboration because Todd was really, it was every day. Like, okay, we're wrapped here. Grab me these guys and let's have them, throw themselves against the wall or make some efforts, like you're being struggling down the hall or whatever it is. And so those are the things that, to me, showed how much Todd really cared about, what the film was going to sound like and what the textures are going to be, and that everybody's going to be able to do with the sound of the film.
And Steve, just to add, you got a ton of wild stuff too that Todd wanted, just individual snippets and characters and flavors just to have, and that's rare for a director to take time on set to look forward and be able to get that stuff. And Jason had mentioned this during the music numbers. Both Lady Gaga and Joaquin had their own personal pianists who were in ISO booths. Can you tell us about that? We weren't there for that, but I imagine that's pretty complicated. You have live music performed not to a click track. The tempo is determined by the actors, and they're getting the piano through an earpiece that, so you have to beam that to them, and then that's a pretty complex stuff.
Yeah, the complicated part with all the music is, you really want the actors to drive the performance. You don't want to hit a playback track and just have them catch up to it on the day. And so we would actually have we had 2 Alexes, Alex Smith and Alex. What's Alex's last name? Shoot, I blew it. Anyway, we had 2 pianists. They're both Alex. One's for Gaga and one's for Joaquin. and they would have a monitor and a headset to watch the scene, and they were all digital pianos, so we'd plug directly into them, feed it into us, feed it to them, and then also feed it to the actors on set. And so, once they would start singing, the pianists would start playing. We would capture that as well, and we would mix that into everybody's headsets so you could see the scene with music, and that kind of drove the performances of our two main characters, and also anybody else who's singing in a scene, without it having to be without you having to drag the actors with you. You would play it. They would play it live. The real complicated moment was in the music room, which there's a few scenes that didn't make the movie, but it's an interesting thing that the grand piano in that room that gets lit on fire, we had art department digitize it so you could pull a lever out, which would release the keys, but the keys were still active. We would get a signal, turn that MIDI signal into music, and then send it back through everybody's earpieces. So when Alex Smith is playing in that room, he's actually playing the piano. And so it was this technical back and forth to make it all work. And I will say there was one time where, it's a scene that didn't make it, but Gaga's character ends up kicking the piano. And when she kicks the piano, the entire system kind of shut down for 5 seconds and it all rebooted. And we were sitting back, mission control back, at my cart, and we all just panicked and we're like, she kicked it and now there's no music. But Alex kept playing and the computer rebooted and then it all turned back on and everybody could hear, and we were like, holy crap. I hope she doesn't keep kicking the piano.
In character.
Yeah, in character. It was great. I mean, it was a great moment. Everybody stayed in it. But we just, we had a small heart attack back in the sound department.
Jason, what do you remember about the song Bewitched, getting into that one? Because it's stylistically, it's very interesting to how picture is being shown because of the story components. But yeah, what do you like about the song Bewitched, the moment there?
It's a very risky kind of vulnerable scene for Joaquin, and I think it's what makes this movie way different than anything else in Joker 1, or certainly I think Todd's done. And I think the music has to really it has to heighten that moment emotionally, but it also has to be super supportive, where you don't have this highly produced vocal, which is easier to support, as opposed to this super rough, crazy person, that you're trying to support musically, which I think is one of the unique things about the movie. So it's very much an imperfect vocal, which is sort of a challenge in itself. And how do you seat music around that, like in a soundscape, to make it feel like this isn't a polished performance. It's just a character piece. And how do you fill the gaps with the arrangement, but I think the soundscape really plays a huge role in that, to how to fit all of that in Arkham and around the jail cell to Joaquin's voice. So it was a lot of emphasis on sound, I think, in a scene like that.
When you guys started to understand the story and obviously the role of the courtroom, did you guys start to imagine how you wanted to cover it, how you wanted to represent it? There's moments of the dynamics in the courtroom are really interesting. You guys get very quiet and also very loud, and people are yelling off camera, and then obviously later in the film there's explosions. But what was your sense of the courtroom? How was it treated, and what was the kind of the balance that you found from production through the mix?
That was the very first No, that was the second recording mission, where we sent John Fasol and Erik Potter out to work with Steven on set to get those crowds, because there's nothing like a few hundred extras. You can't fake that in post. So just getting the real deal of their chants and the din of everything. And actually, after Todd had wrapped the photography end of it, he directed the whole crowd for us, to get all these different chants, pro-Joker chants, anti-Joker chants, hang him, this and that. And that kind of became sort of the texture of the courtroom. So when we're inside and not much is happening, we might have a little din of the crowds establish Gotham traffic and things off screen. But then when, for example, when the verdicts start coming in, you can hear those hundreds of protesters out through the window start to get activated. And Todd was so funny. He was like, wait, how'd you get all that stuff? It sounds so real. And we're like, dude, you helped us direct all of that. It's like, oh yeah, that's right.
Tom and Dean, what do you remember in terms of just getting the tracks? Because I want to focus on this one with the defense rest, where it's basically the verdict. Gaga and Joker walk out of the trial, and then we transition into the queue. Going into Build a Mountain. What do you remember? Because that's like it goes quiet to big into a musical number. Like those transitions. How do you guys, like, specifically for this scene? What do you remember about building this moment?
On our end, it was we took a lot of time to get the rhythm correct with getting rid of that crowd right before they start to go into their moment, and that took some time because we messed around with using the group a little bit, extending a little more. How much more of the effects crowd do we use? How do we get rid of the traffic and whatnot? And I think we nailed it pretty good. Again, all these transitions were about rhythm and what felt good. Take it away, Tom.
What they were doing on the effects side was, great in terms of like kind of building this whole, like we're talking about this crowd of people and all this stuff happening outside in addition to the inside the courtroom people, but all those people outside, we don't ever see them, out the window or anything. It's just like, but yet you totally buy the reality that like there's, a few hundred people sitting out there, and they kind of always get the information a little delayed from what's happening, so you can hear them when something happens in the courtroom kind of react to some of it, like they're watching the news, somehow, and they're getting this information with this little bit of a delay. And so it just adds this great, real feeling to it.
Mr. Dent, call your next witness.
We're not calling any more witnesses, Your Honor. That is the state's case. The state rests.
Very well. All right, Mr. Fleck. At this point, you may mount your defense.
The defense rests as well, Your Honor.
Pardon? Mr. Fleck, you don't want to put on any defense?
No, Your Honor. The defense rests. That's all, folks. All right.
That's enough. This is a court of law. With both sides having rested, this court will recess until tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Made our case worse. Fucking idiot.
You're gonna fry for killing my son.
Will you be convicted? Over here.
Really the guideline of how we deal with the dynamics you're mentioning in the courtroom, how quiet things get, how big things get is following, what the actors are doing and really trying to have moments where they're being intimate, feel intimate. And when they're being, a little more, timid or cautious, that we get really close and you feel like you hear every little detail. You could hear, somebody just move in their chair in the back of the room or something. And then, as things build and get more chaotic, it gets that big and it takes over. I know for me, one of the things I really wanted to do in there was it was going to be a big part of the movie, it taking place in that room. And so I really wanted to nail the feeling of that room with the reverb on, the voices, and there's some of the people are talking on microphones. I mean, there's a few spots where Arthur leans in and, makes a comment to the mic sitting on the desk, or, the witnesses have a mic sitting there. And so we played with, I put some stuff kind of like there's some, cheap 70s speaker in the back of the room so that, the people in the back of the room can kind of hear what's going on. But, that was, lots of little things like that add to the texture of that room and that space. And one of the things we were doing constantly in this movie was shifting perspectives and having lots of little details that shift, so that you really feel, kind of almost a constant tracking of that. And where, it may be just one of the lawyers talking to, the witness or whatever, and there isn't really a lot of other stuff going on, but the camera kind of moves and shifts around in the room. And depending on what Arthur is focusing on, that would determine, maybe we kind of ease just a little bit back and perspectivize them a little bit so that we drift slightly with Arthur, or we hyper focus in on something as he's getting more, worked up and everything. In this particular transition, going into Build a Mountain, we kind of drift off, things get crazy and chaotic, but he's going off into his mind, into this, little number and journey with Lee. And so you can hear that shape of that. It's not anything abrupt. It's like it kind of washes over him and takes him away into, the song.
What are you going to do if they let you off?
We're gonna build a mountain from a little hill. Gonna build me a mountain. At least I hope I will. Gonna build a mountain. Gonna build it
I don't know how we're gonna do it. Only know we're gonna try.
I mean, once you get into Build a Mountain, I mean, what the editorial team is doing, like the transitions, going from a church into like, it's just into the piano moment. Like it's very highly stylized, and it's really fun to follow. From a story standpoint, once again, then you're in the Pogo Club, like you still don't understand what's going on, and you're just following along with the song, but visually there's so much storytelling. Steven, how did you guys piece all these locations together, even if it was all done on a stage?
Yeah, I think the consistency comes from the fact that Gaga and Joaquin are going to sing live to the tracks, and I think that's where you kind of you're able to piece more of that together, especially when Gaga's giving it her all and she's dancing down the the path to the church, and you can still hear the efforts in her voice making that journey. So it's not a crisp, clean, perfect vocal. It's it's a little messy, which is perfect in the fantasy. I remember her maid of honors, on the day we mic'd them all, and they went, "Oh, why are we being mic'd?" I said, "Oh, you guys are going to sing. You're going to sing along. We're not going to play back the track." I mean, they didn't use their live singing, but what it does is it encouraged the actors or her bridesmaids to kind of give all the effort and give all that. It's just a different feel than when you're just trying to lip sync something. It's the difference between singing along in your car or singing karaoke at a bar. There's a huge difference in the performance that you give. So we always wanted to make sure that we encouraged, that to be as authentic feeling and looking as we could. And so, yeah, just to piece it all together, it was really their vocals that was the glue in that. at least on the production side of it.
Gonna build us a heaven from a little hell. Gonna build us a heaven, and I know darn well that if we build that mountain, I'll take you up the mountain, and heaven will be waiting there. Gonna build a mountain from a little heaven.
The live vocal really helped kind of sell the different. There's kind of three chapters. You have you have the courtroom, then you go into the chapel piece, and then followed by the tap dancing scene at Pogo's. And I think it was sort of all recorded the same way on set, so you're kind of walking away with the same materials, and then in post production they all sound very, very distinctly different. From the way the vocals treated in the courtroom to the chapel to the live, sort of band performance with Pogo. So it's kind of interesting how the sound team's able to sort of adapt all those, the same vocal track into very different environments.
Jason, how did you describe some of the transitional underscore moments of connecting, getting in and out of these major musical cues? It's always a challenge. It doesn't need to feel like it's just a musical, and now we're into a musical cue, and it's a very natural kind of handoff. How did you guys navigate that, both in editorially and just on the mixed stage?
I think a lot of it was working with Hilder's material, and being able to, Todd definitely wanted Joker 2 to have the same tone as Joker 1 in sound and music, even though it was a very different movie. And I think the score really, really helped kind of weave that together and kind of soften some of the transitions into people singing and whatnot. So, and it helped naturally kind of bend those song standards into into Hilder's score world, which I think we were used to in Joker 1.
The songs are so lush and they are so diverse and dynamic, and like they're just on their own, they're incredibly interesting to listen to. But then you also have to take the sound effect tracks, and there's a story component going on, and there's a lot of departments all looking at the same thing. How did you guys navigate just the music bed in the mix?
I think everybody really had to really put their heads together and work on it. We spent a lot of time on the dub stage. I think there was some super detailed work between Ethan and Erik and Tom and Dean, and I'm sure I know they had a lot of areas to tackle, but I think the transitions were kind of like way up the priority scale for all of us, and it wasn't just on music. I think it was on mixing and backgrounds and all these things to kind of make those seem seamless and natural. And there were long transitions. I think if we were coming in and out of reality, it was kind of like, how abrupt can we make them? But I think in most cases there was sort of a slow, really stylized movement to them that sort of took all efforts to kind of get that global approach to kind of eliminate the musical transition that we were all sort of fighting against.
Yeah, Ethan, what do you remember? Because you enlisted Michael Arnold, the choreographer, to do some tap dancing pickups. When I look at the footage, how do you cut tap dancing? How does that work?
Erik just took a big spin on the tap dancing, and should probably speak to the tap dancing specifically. But what I would like to sort of hone in on is something Tom was just talking about, the details. And for us, like, just nailing all the details became so important in this movie because, we wanted to give the sound, the sound of the movie a naturalistic, like, lived in feel. And so that's about really nailing the details. And that's why we did, so much recording in all these different places where we could get, all these sort of natural acoustics of the space, and just for it to feel bespoke and like custom made, authentic to the world. And then, that sort of natural reality that grounds us and makes us engage with the world, then gives way to these fantasy sequences that really become driven by the music, essentially. So yeah, it's real for us. It was really about nailing all these details, and the tap dancing that you just brought up is a great example of really wanting that to become almost hyper real, and in terms of sort of driving, helping to drive that little sequence.
That was one of my most fun challenges of the movie. I grew up with a dad who was obsessed with musicals, and in particular, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Gene Kelly, like the classic tap dancers. And what I love about tap dance is it's kind of a blurred, it's kind of a hybrid of sound design and music in a way. And so we took that challenge on. Michael Arnold, who is one of the choreographers and is a tap dance expert, basically gave me a little college course on tap dancing. There's so much lingo, but he broke it all down for us, and we recorded that all like on video and with sound. So we had a whole glossary to kind of work with, like what are the he tolls versus the paradiddles and so on. And he did a bunch of it on the Folie stage to picture, but ultimately the best stuff was me just recording him doing the different moves and then precisely going in and getting everything to line up to the 16th notes and 32nd notes. And this is basically Arthur's fantasy of I'm a star. So like Ethan said, it needed to be kind of like hyper real and sort of perfect. And Joaquin learned how to tap dance like from scratch. And according to Michael, he learned faster than any dancer he's ever trained before.
Then he goes downstage doing a chug variation.
That combination of Joaquin's performance with sort of our tap dance sound design, to me, is just kind of like a highlight of where you can really have this cross-pollination between sound design and music in a really great way. And I think what Tom did with the whole music mix of that sequence, it feels like you're right there in this club. This is the first movie I've ever worked on where there's been such back and forth between the dialogue and music departments. So Kira Rossler, who is the dialogue ADR supervisor, would do her edit on the music. That would go to Tom for cleanup. Then it would go from Tom to the music department. They would do their work. And so there was like this sort of circular workflow that I've never seen before on any movie that I think was really hard for them to pull off, but really impressive.
I mean, this movie builds up to the moment of the verdict. It's an incredible performance from Joaquin because it's holding on his face. You can see him processing, and he starts laughing, and he gets attacked by someone in the audience. And then it's just like this moment of unrest leading into an explosion, leading into an escape, his mind of an escape? So maybe, okay, so Steven, what is the reality of this whole, like, how did this happen on set? And how did you guys also start to sequence just this whole long, it's like a 6-7 minute sequence?
Yeah, so we started obviously on stage. We were filming the courtroom, for a few weeks or a month at a time, and then we left it so that art department could make the big hole in the set with all the rebar and concrete. So we came back, we filmed that sequence, the interior, and as he walks up and out the window, there's a piece of VFX that stitches him into a South Los Angeles set that was built outside with all the debris, him walking down it and having the car and the Joker look-alike, I guess the costume character Joker, who grabs him and throws him in the car. And at that point, there's another stitch that we do on a stage at Disney, which is their kind of a LED wall so that you could see, the world driving by. So that's on stage as well. And then the camera gets pulled out through another stitch, gets pulled out from downtown Los Angeles that we've made to look like Gotham, where Arthur starts to run down the street and the Joker look like it's hit by a car. And that is all, so what is that? 5 shots all stitched together to make it look like one. And so we have real locations, on stage and in video wall sets. And, I have to say, when I watch the movie, it looks and sounds seamless because of, the amount of work that everybody did, post-production wise, because on the production side of it, we're getting breaths and vocals and dialogue, but beyond that, it's, all the extra car stuff, all the other stuff is done. Obviously, we're not doing it on the production side of it because it's all faked on our side.
Hey, let's get them out of here immediately. Get them out of here. Don't move, you sick.
Yeah, Erik and Ethan, how do you guys describe your process for that explosion? It's dangerous sounding. It's the visual is crazy explosive. Debris is everywhere, and then it gets quiet, and we get into this kind of textural perspective moment before he leaves. What do you guys remember about how this scene evolved for you guys?
Well, I remember on the stage we worked quite a bit with Dean and Tom on, starting with building to the explosion, getting the sort of energy level leading into it to feel correct for the for what was happening. And then on the explosion itself, we spent quite a bit of time working to get enough power and articulation and grittiness out of the explosion itself. And then making the shift, into into the interior, of Arthur's head, post explosion, making that transition was that actually felt fairly easy because there are so many different ways you could take that and so many different levels of sort of submersion into that. But my memory is that we came to that fairly quickly, but I could be wrong on that, but you guys should correct me. But, it was always clear to us that that's, at least to Erik and I working, before we even started mixing, that's where it wanted to go, interior post-explosion kind of sonic haze. And then I remember we spent quite a bit of time on the stage trying to figure out the right balance between starting to get back into reality and where the music started to come in. It was a very fun collaborative process that I just loved where we ended up with it. And I feel like it's, the perfect example of a scene that was like total collaboration between music, dialogue, and sound effects in a movie that as a whole felt like one of the most collaborative experiences I've had in my career, in terms of fusing those three elements into like such a complex and subtle and nuanced fusion of music and dialogue and sound effects. So yeah, for me, it really sort of perfectly encapsulates the sort of overall experience of working on this film.
It's really funny because I was thinking all the things you were just saying, and I was thinking them in the previous scene we were talking about as well. Like, oh, this is a great example. This scene. The truth is, it's like you go through the movie, and that's how we did it, right? It was a super collaborative process, and nothing was too sacred, right? It was like we had the time to not only do the thing, but to redo the thing. And so we could do it, and we could get something to a place where we were all happy with it. And then we had a moment to like step back and come back at it and go, like, that's really cool, but is it the best it can be? Is there anything else here that we want to add or take away or change? And so we really had this unique opportunity, I think, to like, kind of just keep pressing it forward and see that we could sort of eke everything out of it that we could. And everybody did that as a team. And so it was just such a great experience to be a part of.
To me, post-explosion, when we go into Arthur's headspace, the shell shock headspace, that kind of idea has been done before in movies. One thing we talked about a lot was, okay, how do we have that feeling, but do it in a unique, new kind of novel way? So a lot of that was like getting the proper treatments on his breaths that are muffled and solidian, where he's hearing it more with his body and chest than with his ears, which are blown out. And then the whole long arc of introducing the next frequencies where his hearing and his perception is coming back again, all the way down, climbing out through the flaming rubble, getting grabbed by this Joker impersonator, and you start to hear a little bit more, but you can barely understand what the guy's yelling, and he throws him into this car. And we used kind of the car door as the first step up, where it's behind us, he's thrown into the back seat, almost being kidnapped, and that takes us another step up. And then there's a shot, and we were just trying to find the right little moment of performance in Joaquin, and he does this kind of thing. And we thought, okay, that's the clearing of the ears moment. So we had this binaural recording kind of ear canals opening up again. And that's where we now are start to getting more into the unmuffled range. And then that peaks where in the opposite direction, all of the Gotham fire trucks are buzzing by in the other direction, and these Joker fans are flipping them the birdie. And we had a great time over a few days recording all of these vintage 1970s fire trucks with the original air horns and sirens. It's so nice to have the time and resources. Warner Brothers was so great. Producer Joseph Garner was so great. We mentioned Lisa Dennis. They really gave us all of the ability to go out and do all of these missions and kind of build this movie from scratch. And to me, it pays off. I mean, we kept saying this on the mixing stage. This movie's like a unicorn. Normally you have to fight for, okay, if we only get a few more days on this or some more recording budget for this, we can take it up a notch. And there was none of that arguing on this one. I think there was a true appreciation from the top down, starting with Todd, that sound is a character in this movie. It's kind of the centerpiece of this movie. And so I'm grateful we got to work on this unicorn. We're not sure there'll ever be kind of an experience like this again for us. So it's, for me, I'm very appreciative.
Because we had the time, and after a day's work, we leave, and a lot of times you leave the dub stage and you mull over what could have been better or what you could have done in that reel or wherever that sequence you're mixing. This movie, we did the same thing, but came back and said, I had this thought last night. Let's try XYZ. And we had the time to do that. So all these scenes evolved. And at the end of the mix, it became what Tom was saying, how can we make it better? But now it became, how can we make more detail? And we were going through the explosion sequence, and he's crawling, and Ethan on stage, he was sitting behind us. He said, I think something should fall behind us. Why is everything stopping while he's crawling? And Erik goes, that's a great idea. And we build something, and we place it back there. And it just made everything real. It made everything feel correct. And then we're in the car, and his ears pop, and the guys are, the driver and the passenger, they're fighting on how to negotiate through the traffic. And Erik comes in one morning. I'm the sound effects guy that gets jazzed by the little things as opposed to the big things. And Erik comes in, he says, that Aadahl sound that those 70s seats make, I cut some stuff here when the guy's moving and he looks. And it was such those little tiny salt and pepper moments for me that made all the difference in the world, and how the scene, again, knits together. So then we pop out, and the guys cut all all the car horns because the traffic stopped. And Todd, we're doing a playback, and he loves everything he says, he sees and hears, and he says, oh my gosh, those horns are great, but the light, they have to be honking for a reason. So the visual effects of the light, stoplight, he had them turn green because it was just stationary red. He's like, why are they honking? So visually, they followed sound effects and made a visual effect for us. And then him running harkens back to the running scene in Joker 1. So for me, when mixing it, it brought back that memory of how I mixed it, how Todd back on Joker 1 was really adamant about the feet have to be loud, have to make a statement. So I mixed it as I mixed the first Joker, because for me, that whole scene represented a harken back to Joker. This was the perfect storm of a perfect team. The movie, the director, the producing team, Steven back on, Erik and Ethan with Dean and Tom, because we've done some stuff prior that we enjoyed working together, but everything lent to this soundtrack for me being the perfect soundtrack. And somebody once told me, if you hit to the perfect soundtrack, you got to walk away.
I mean, to me, I think it's the team. I think if you look at every new frontier that we stumbled in on this, I think we all had, Maestro was a big one for, Tom and Dean, myself, Morrow. I think that was kind of shooting live music to a whole new level. I think, the Star is Born nature played into it. I think Joker 1 played in, I think a lot of those things that, it's great for us when a filmmaker takes a new risk, because then we all get put in a new challenge and we can all kind of collectively, look at it as a team and look at all the risks we've taken in the past and, talk about what worked, what didn't work, how to get the most out of it. So it's a total gift when you get to do it with the same team of people. I think that really, I think you're just ultimately more confident in the way you can kind of deliver things and know that each gear is doing the right thing.
Well, Erik, Ethan, Tom, Dean, Steven, Jason, thank you guys so much for spending a little time talking about Joker, Folie, Deux. But yeah, thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you guys.
Many thanks to our guests today, and if you'd like to listen to more conversations from the Soundworks Collection, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on all major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube. You can also find exclusive daily video clips on our Instagram and TikTok pages, and connect with other creatives around the world through our email industry mailing list at soundworkscollection.com. If you have a story or project that you want to propose for the show, please send us an email at info@soundworkscollection.com. And thanks again for listening.